Picture this: a crowded boarding gate, two people standing in the same line, holding the same economy ticket, waiting for the same delayed flight, same seat, same legroom, same lukewarm coffee waiting for them on the other side of the jet bridge. And yet, somehow, one of them looks wealthy, not loud, not flashy, just wealthy. You can't quite explain why. There's no designer logo screaming for attention, no gold watch catching the light. But your brain has already made the decision before you've even thought about it. Here's the strange part: it's almost never the money. It's something quieter than that. There's a set of invisible signals that follow certain people around, and once you learn to see them, you can't unsee them. So let's decode them, one by one. The first thing you'll notice is that they never look like they're trying. This is the one that breaks people's expectations. We assume wealth announces itself. Big logos, outfits assembled to impress, accessories arranged like a display case. But the people who actually read as wealthy tend to do the opposite. Simple clothing, nothing shouting for your attention, comfort chosen over performance. They'd rather be at ease than admired. And the irony is, the ease itself becomes the thing you admire. Because real security removes the need to prove anything. When you're not worried about how you're being perceived, you stop dressing for an audience. And people feel that the moment you walk past them. The second signal is movement. Watch how they move bus when everyone else is rushing. At the gate, in the security line, during boarding. There's a certain kind of person who's always slightly panicked, checking the clock, shifting their weight, glancing at the departure board for the 10th time in 2 minutes. And then there's the other kind, the ones who move slowly, deliberately, like the schedule is a suggestion rather than a threat. They're not careless, they simply aren't anxious. And we read that calm as control. Panic looks like powerlessness. Stillness looks like power. Fair or not, that's the translation your brain performs automatically. Now here's the third one. And this is where it gets interesting. Watch how they treat the staff. The gate agent, the flight attendant, the person at the desk who's been apologizing for a delay that isn't their fault. There are two failed versions of this interaction. There's the person who's rude and dismissive, who treats service workers like furniture. And then there's the person who overcompensates. Loud, performative about being important, who needs the staff to understand exactly who they're dealing with. But the ones who actually carry status do neither. They're just normal, respectful. They have an ordinary human conversation. Kindness, without a performance attached to it. Because someone who genuinely feels secure in their position doesn't need to establish a hierarchy in a boarding line. They're not auditioning for importance. They already assume it, quietly. And that assumption is more convincing than any display could ever be. The fourth thing you'll notice, is how they handle deals. You've seen it happen. A 10-minute argument over €3 at an airport kiosk. By the end of it, nobody remembers the coffee. Everyone remembers the argument. There's a kind of person who turns every small transaction into a battle, hunting obsessively for the discount, the upgrade, the loophole, treating a minor saving like a personal victory. There's nothing wrong with being careful with money, but there's a difference between careful and consumed. The people who read as wealthy tend to decide quickly. They weigh value, and they weigh time. And more often than not, they protect their time first, because they've understood something the rest of us forget. Their hours are worth more than their pride. They're not willing to spend an afternoon defending their ego over the price of a coffee. Which brings us to the fifth signal, and this one hides in their belongings. Look at the suitcase, the laptop, the bag, the watch, whatever they're carrying. There's a certain kind of person whose possessions look like trophies. Pristine, untouched, polished to perfection, as if the object exists to be seen rather than used. And then there's the other kind. Their things are clearly good quality, but they're worn. There are scuffs on the suitcase, a faded edge on the leather, the soft signs of something that's been carried through years of actual life. And strangely, That worn quality reads as wealthier than the spotless version. Because owning something and using something send completely different messages. The trophy says, I bought this. The worn object says, this is simply part of my life. And it has been for a long time. Now, here's where it gets a little counterintuitive, because the next signal is the opposite of what you'd expect. They ask more questions than they answer. You'd think the person who commands a room would be the one doing all the talking, steering every conversation back toward themselves. But watch closely, and it's usually the reverse. The people who read as quietly powerful tend to be curious. They ask, they listen. They seem genuinely more interested in understanding you than in impressing you. And it lands as magnetic, because attention is a kind of currency, and they're the rare person spending it on someone other than themselves. The ones working hardest to impress the room are almost always the ones least sure they belong in it. Real presence doesn't need the spotlight. It's comfortable handing the spotlight to you. That same quiet logic shows up in the sixth signal, in what they don't talk about. And what they rarely talk about is money. Listen to conversations during a trip, at an event, over dinner. There's a kind of person who keeps circling back to numbers. What things cost, what they earn, what they paid, what they saved, what something was worth. And then there are the people who almost never go there. They talk about experiences, projects, ideas. It's not that they're hiding anything. It's that money simply isn't the most interesting thing in the room to them. Money talks. Security usually doesn't. The people still announcing the price of everything are often the ones least sure of their footing. The seventh thing is physical, and you can spot it from across a room. They seem comfortable taking up space. Nervous energy is visible. The small fidgets, the constant scanning of the room for approval, the body language that's always asking, am I doing this right? And then there's the opposite. The relaxed posture, the unhurried presence, natural eye contact that doesn't flinch away or try too hard to hold on. They just occupy their space like they belong in it. And here's the quiet truth underneath all of this. The perception of wealth is very often just the perception of security wearing a nicer coat. We see someone at ease in their own body, and our minds reach for the nearest explanation. We call it wealth when really we're looking at comfort. And that's the turning point, because once you line all of this up, something becomes obvious. The calm, the absence of showing off, the respect for other people, the curiosity, the comfort, the independence from everyone else's judgment. None of those things actually require money. You can buy the watch, you can buy the bag, the suit, the first-class ticket, but you cannot buy the way someone moves through a room when they've stopped needing the room's approval. Most of the signals we associate with wealth set aren't really about wealth at all. They're about psychological freedom. The freedom of not needing to perform. The freedom of not measuring yourself against the people around you. The freedom of simply being without an audience in mind. So the next time you're standing at a crowded boarding gate, looking at two people holding the same economy ticket, remember this. You're probably not looking at wealth. You're reading their behavior, the calm, the ease, the quiet refusal to perform. You're looking at comfort with oneself. The real impression of status was never about having more. It was about needing less attention, less reassurance, less proof. And maybe that's the most useful thing in all of this. Because if those signals don't actually come from money, then they're not reserved for the wealthy. They're available to anyone willing to stop performing. So let me ask you, have you ever met someone who looked wealthy without wearing a single expensive thing? Think about what they were really doing. I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you enjoyed decoding this with me, stay a while. There's always more to notice.